Welcome to the Rising Entrepreneurs Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and their journey. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the co-host of this show. Check out our archives if you're new to this show. We've got lots of great interviews with entrepreneurs, CEOs, and founders talking about some of the challenges that they're through. And I'm also the co-founder of Rise 25, where we help connect B2B business owners with their ideal prospects. And I have been a EO San Francisco member for a few years now. And this episode is brought to you by EO San Francisco. Now, EO, or the Entrepreneurs Organization, is a global peer-to-peer network of more than 16,000 now influential business owners with 198 chapters in 61 countries. And if you're a founder, co-founder, owner, or controlling shareholder of a company generating 7 figures or more in revenues, then we want to tell you about EO. So EO is a member-led organization. It enables leading entrepreneurs in the Bay Area to learn, grow, and achieve greater success. The EOSF chapter was founded in 1991. Today, we have about 100 members in industries ranging from marketing to agriculture, tech, and professional services. And to learn more about how it works or to come to a test drive, come join us at eonetwork.org/San Francisco. And all right, my guest here today is Pat Costello. He's a veteran of the insurance industry. And what's really interesting is he started a cyber insurance specialist firm, which does the underwriting for one of the most comprehensive cyber insurance policies that a business can buy. And so if your business is doing anything online and you've had any curiosity around what your liability could be with online, with cyber attacks, things like that, which is just becoming so much more common, then you will want to listen to this interview. We're going to talk about that. And he actually co-founded this firm with his brother, Mike, in 2015. So we'll talk about that. And he's actually a 4th generation in insurance, which I didn't even know that going back that many generations, we even had insurance. I mean, that's like wheel and buggy days. So that's impressive that, your great grandfather was doing this. And he's also the host of the Evolved Broker podcast, which he's been doing since about 2020. All right, Pat, such a pleasure to have you here. And I want to journey into your background in entrepreneurship. And you had this experience of going to, I believe it was a baseball game, and you went to go get food from the food stand, and a foul ball landed at your seat, and you missed it. And this is about 2010. And you said, it wouldn't be great if there was an app that you could just order food from your seat. Now I think that kind of thing exists, but they didn't at the time. But here's the crazy thing. You were actually taking entrepreneurship classes at the time. You brought it up with a professor, and they said that's a horrible idea and never work.
Yeah, that's true, John. My idea got absolutely trashed. And to this day, I don't think someone has really cracked that code the way that it should be cracked. I'm a big San Francisco Giants fan. That's where that foul ball incident happened. And, been to a lot of Giants games this season already. Been to some Golden State Warriors playoff games. Big shout out to the Warriors for just winning the championship. But, it's a lose-lose when you get up from your seat, right? You have to wait in line. Nobody likes waiting in line. And, it's not like the stadium is not equipped to bring food and drinks to your seats. Generally, a lot of times it only happens in the lower level.
Certain luxury level or certain level. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why that's not the norm across the whole stadium. But like you said, there have been a few apps that have come out, and I think there may even be an app for that lower level. But, just like there was a MySpace, there could be a Facebook, right?
So you brought this up. You're taking classes in entrepreneurship, and you bring it up with your professor. What does this professor say?
I sent it to him via email because I was just kind of inspired by the idea and the experience that I had. And he just absolutely shot it down, said it was a terrible idea, and, didn't make me feel great about it. And I was so frustrated and resonant about the concept that I, fired back, and then he kind of backed down a little bit. And then we kind of went back and forth. And anyways, I didn't end up using it as our idea for the class just because it seemed like that class was focused on pushing like a sustainable, environmentally friendly entrepreneurship concept, whether it was said or whether it wasn't. But anyways, it was a very interesting experience and not the most pleasant one to kind of start my entrepreneurial journey off of. But I was definitely appreciative to even have the experience of having an entrepreneurship class, because I know that class wasn't even a thing
Yeah.
a few years prior.
I have a BA in English, so I certainly wasn't taking that kind of stuff. Could have used it. So you go and, you're fourth generation in insurance. Did you grow up like, looking up to your dad and thinking like, I want to go into this? Because it's funny that I had a very different experience. Like my dad used to make fun of insurance, like as a job, like it was boring,
Oh
uninteresting.
yeah.
In adulthood, I've come to the conclusion that it is the most brilliant business model as of all of them. And I wish that I'd grown up in a situation where it had been revered, because now I look at people that have been doing insurance for a while, they sell, they get paid. It just seems like an amazing business model.
I appreciate you saying that, John, because it still has a little bit of that reputation. I think it's primarily just because people think of a product they don't necessarily want to buy, but they have to buy, with their car insurance, with their homeowner's insurance, with their renter's insurance, et cetera. But I grew up with a dad who I can literally remember when I was learning to spell words, like insurance is one of the words that he test me on to spell. He'd always say the phrase, "No one has endurance like the man who sells insurance." So he was and is a great insurance salesman, and he has the book of business to prove it. But that's how I got integrated into the insurance industry. And my brother and I both started working for our dad's insurance agency in Marin County in San Rafael, California, when we were in high school and then in college. And the duties that we had shifted from everything from being the receptionist to doing direct bill to, random tasks around the office, to cleaning the office, to getting our insurance licenses and selling and setting up meetings for him. So it ranged, but that's how I got the taste of it. And then coming out of school, I still didn't know I wanted to be in the insurance industry. It was tough to get a job coming out of college in 2012. And, I was literally working at Sports Authority in Marin County, Sports Authority Elite, if anyone's been there in Town Center. No longer there, but I was working there selling shoes while applying to jobs. And I must have applied to 300 to 400 jobs. And the first one that took me was this insurance company called Ace that worked in that had an office in downtown San Francisco. And frankly, I was hyped up just because I now had the ability to move into San Francisco, live with my buddies and get a job that was training me within the insurance industry. So that was my first foray into the insurance world.
So it was sometime later that you became a bit dismayed. It was a very large bureaucratic insurance agency, or maybe this was another one that you ended up with later. But at some point, you're working for a large bureaucratic insurance agency, and your brother had gone to work somewhere else, and you decide to start a company together. What I want to know is, was the vision to make it focused on cyber insurance, or did that come later?
We started off, the one word that I can give you when we started our company off is, I think we were just, the word is frustrated. We were both frustrated. I was frustrated with the big insurance company I was at, just because I didn't see a path where my hard work really led to any results or promotions. I didn't know if anyone was seeing me. I didn't have a lot of role models. He was experiencing really the opposite of that from a company size standpoint. He was at a very small firm that he's like, frustrated with the maybe lack of organization. And he thought maybe we could improve upon a lot of that. And so we started because we wanted to control our own destiny. Mm-hmm. And the hottest topic at the time was cyber insurance. And it was really called cyber liability at the time, because data breaches were happening left and right. You probably heard of the Target data breach, Home Depot, Equifax, but those breaches were kind of sweeping the nation, and the liability around them was a little bit confusing and ambiguous, and the coverage to pay for the costs associated with those breaches was very fresh, very new, and being tested really at that time. So cyber insurance as a general concept has, no pun intended, our company is called Evolve, but has evolved dramatically over the last 7 years.
Yeah. And so at this point, you're out of college for 3-4 years, something like this, when you start your company?
Yeah, we started, I want to say I was 25 and my brother was 24.
Wow. So
Very,
that's a big, thorny, unresolved morass of an issue to take on. Was that intimidating at all?
it was intimidating, but it was exciting. The whole concept, it was because new lines of insurance don't come around that often,
Hmm.
right? And frankly, by the time we started our company, I thought it was old news, right?
Yeah, looking back now, that was like 7 years ago now, but that's early
Yeah,
days.
yeah, it was early days, and we had some connections with some innovators within the cyber insurance world that provide us with support and encouragement and a backing with Lloyd's of London. And at that point, we put ourselves in positions where we really understood the industry, we understood the players, we understood the distribution, we understood who had leverage and who didn't. Our dad has always given us great advice. It has been very straightforward in terms of how he sees the industry. And we thought, yes, we're younger than most who would look to strike out on their own and start a business, especially in this new world. But we figured, what better time to take a risk?
Yeah. And I don't know, I don't understand the insurance industry, but is it hard? Is it challenging to just call up Lloyd's of London and say, "Hey, we got an idea for a new insurance product that I know hasn't really been done much before"?
It's not as hard as people think. I think there's a big benefit to being in the world and spending time in the world and taking time to understand the players in the space. So I do think there is a learning curve to getting in the insurance world. Frankly, it's a really a new vocabulary someone has to learn when they're getting into the insurance world. But once you have that dialed, once you understand the major concepts and once you understand the players in the space, I don't think it's overly complicated to dive into. And product creation is a really unique thing that we're heavily involved in at the moment. But when you talk to a reinsurance broker, the reinsurance broker is the one who's going to hook up the capacity for you on a given product. And putting a product together, there's a lot of players involved. But at the end of the day, you will never know until you find out. I think with most entrepreneurial ideas, like you really learn while you're doing it. And I think most of the time you will learn that it's a little bit easier than you expected.
So we started with the story of your idea being shot down by the entrepreneurship professor, which came up in conversation here, many years later. Was that stuck in your head at all as you started this new business? Like, was there any mental blockages around that? Like, sometimes people, when they start a business, um, I don't know if inferiority complex is the right word, or just some insecurities or something like that. There's a lot of that kind of internal stuff that can come up and can kind of hold you back. Was that a challenge at all? When you were getting started?
I didn't hold any grudges. I was just more excited to be off on my own, controlling my own destiny, seeing the impact of my results, and taking it one step at a time. From we got to set up this LLC to we got to set up the website to we got to figure out how we're going to distribute this thing and who our brokers are that we work with, and I got to sell them. I got to go from graphic design to setting up the systems to getting the initial brokers, then clients in the door. And so it was kind of just one foot after the other. So I didn't hold any grudges, but it's just like, I don't know. I just look back on the experience I had in that entrepreneurship class. Like, there's just a lot of ways it could have been better. And I think pushing entrepreneurship, encouraging entrepreneurship, and also, like, I think some of the best teachers at Stanford Business School, who I've actually been able to interview a lot of on my podcast. For example, Joel Peterson, who was the former chairman of JetBlue, he thought the idea for Bonobos, which Bonobos men's clothing,
Yeah.
he thought it was a bad idea, but he believed so much in the entrepreneur who started it up that he was the initial angel investor. And so I think fostering and protecting entrepreneurial spirit, and yes, I think real life feedback is totally valuable. Like, I think that's completely necessary, but providing that real life feedback and then also course correcting for how to get back on track, or the path to success, the path to successful entrepreneurship is key. So I'm disappointed by that class, but at the same time, it was a learning lesson, and it is what it is at the end of the day.
So you mentioned real life feedback. What was it like as you started to roll it out, try to explain it to people, educate people on what cyber insurance is, and what types of companies need it? What was it like? What kind of feedback did you get?
It was really tough back in the day because I would walk into a broker's office in Houston, for example, and I'd say, guys, we have the best cyber policy that you can currently buy right now. Hacking attacks are dramatically increasing. I'm showing like a FBI or CIA statistic that's just showing and I'm giving real life examples. And at that point, people still didn't buy that it was a real concept, that cyber exposure existed. A lot of times in the insurance world, people don't buy coverage or feel like it's real unless they've either experienced a hacking attack or there's someone that they know that's experienced a hacking attack. And now, it's so interesting at this point in time now, with how many hacks are attacking, and the fact, how many hacking attacks are happening all the time, in the hard market cycle that we're in, versus when we started, it was a very soft market, right? So not a lot of people were buying. Claims were kind of random, but with the onset of ransomware and wire transfer fraud, things have just morphed and developed to where this is something that every business needs to buy.
Yeah. And so a big part of what you've had to do has been to educate your brokers and kind of educate them on how then they can educate the end user, customer, client. So talk a little bit about how you've built the education.
Yeah. So for those listening, we underwrite one of the most comprehensive cyber insurance products that exists, and we distribute that product through insurance brokers across the country. So those insurance brokers in turn go to their clients and say, hey guys, you guys should consider cyber insurance because you have a huge cyber exposure. So our issue was the insurance broker in the middle didn't necessarily understand cyber exposure or cyber insurance or the coverage or claims that were involved. So we felt it was our mission to go and make sure that those brokers knew exactly how to explain cyber insurance in the most simplistic ways possible. So to date, in the last 7 years, I want to say we've done over 15,000 face-to-face educational presentations to our brokers, where we usually typically, if you work with us, we will have been in your office and we will have given some sort of lunch and learn presentation. We'll bring in lunch and we will break down cyber exposure, cyber coverage, common claims, capabilities, everything you need to know to be able to have these conversations with your clients. Because a lot of times, if you're an account manager or producer at an insurance agency, insurance brokerage across the country, you have to know 20 other lines and you have to know every market associated with each line. So it's likely you're not that confident with a brand new one like cyber.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that was a really big way for us to provide value to our brokers while also getting our name out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I don't know how it works, but you have, you work with 3,000 insurance brokers across the country now. You got to start somewhere, but is there a network where you get plugged in and you add 1,000 at a time, or is that one at a time and eventually it builds a reputation? How did you get to having 3,000 brokers around the country that are all advocating selling your product?
It was a lot of one-offs. And from my job that I initially started at the insurance world, I had a few, I had a few agency connections. My brother had a similar situation. And so a lot of times it was just Google searching insurance agencies in the area and setting up a meeting. We did get hooked up with a couple networks, but it was still a lot of one-off marketing. So Marsh & Berry, for example, was one of our first networks that was cyber insurance is a big topic. We want you guys to come speak on it, and you guys can network at our conference with all the agency owners. And so a lot of my brother's early days was going to a lot of these networking events, meeting these agency owners at the bar, letting them know cyber insurance was a real thing. We created this marketing video that was kind of Dollar Shave Club-esque to make cyber insurance memorable and funny and get it on their radar. So it was, but still, I mean, the deal needed to be massaged and closed. So a lot of times, for example, we meet a broker at one of these events in Arkansas, and then we'd fly to Arkansas and then meet with them in their office, break down everything that we could do, and then begin working with them. So it was a lot of knocking on doors. And the good thing about the US is there's usually insurance agencies in pretty much every major city.
Mhm.
So that basically turned into every single time I was on vacation, it became a work trip. And I guess you could also look at that and vice versa, where I got to see a lot of the US and some
Yeah.
really interesting areas. But it was definitely a grind for the first 2 to 3 years, setting up that network of insurance agencies to work with. So that was probably the toughest part.
Yeah. And pre-COVID, you're on the road a lot. I mean, that must have been expensive for as far as startup costs go. How did you fund those early days?
That's actually really funny that you bring that up, because we had one of the coolest ways of doing it that I've ever heard of that no longer exists. You may have heard of a company called JetSmarter back in the day.
Oh yeah. Was it a private jet like?
Yes.
Okay. They sold excess inventory or something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think
okay.
so. But it was for pennies on the dollar of whatever. They were a unicorn. And my brother and I were at a Tony Robbins Business Mastery Conference. And one of the vendors there was this company called JetSmarter. They were offering for a fee of about $9,000.
Oh, you can fly anytime.
You could fly. They had routes across the US where you could fly, I could fly from San Francisco to LA. I knew when the route was going to be. LA to Chicago, Chicago to New York, New York to Florida. They were headquartered in Florida. So they had that option. So that's built in. And then they also had these last minute 24-hour legs, because a lot of times in the private jet world,
Yeah.
you have a wealthy person.
Repositioning and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm in Montana. And so the jet has to come from, San Francisco to Montana. There's nobody on that flight. And so they were giving us these empty legs. We would just only know 24 hours in advance.
Got it.
But the thing is, you might be flying on like a G4.
Yeah. And you're young, don't have kids, like you can, whatever.
I'm telling you, we maximized that, and might be one of the reasons that they're no longer in business. Because
that sounds amazing.
Oh yeah. It was great. It was very ironic. It's like we would be flying on a private jet to a city and then staying on our college buddy's couch. So we did. That was a very cool. We did it so much to the point that we're like, we need to hire someone in their headquarters area in Florida, and so that this person can then do what we're doing and go set up relationships. And that's why we had a bunch of our first few employees were from Florida Atlantic University. So that was a real highlight of the early days of distribution.
Wow.
A lot of travel.
Wow, that's really cool. Yeah. That's memorable, man. How much fun that is. Well, that'll keep your startup costs down if you just limit it to that.
Yeah, it was cheaper than flying economy.
Yeah, for sure. So who is a company that needs cyber insurance today? Break it down for me. Like, what's an ideal company that should have cyber insurance, and what does it entail?
John, every business in the United States, small or large, needs cyber insurance. If you have a bank account or an email address, that's literally all that somebody needs to be able to look at you as a target. Cyber insurance, if I were to break it down in one sentence, is cyber insurance is coverage for the costs associated with hacking attacks, data breaches, and system failures. Right? So the fact that everything is becoming more and more connected to the internet just means everything has more and more potential to be hacked. So the world that we live in with things like ransomware or funds transfer fraud, those two, like if you're using any sort of technology to run your business, if you're transferring money to anybody, if you literally just have a bank account, if you have, you're a C-level person, you have a personal bank account, those bank accounts are covered within the policy. If you're collecting any sort of information on any individuals, whether it's partners, clients, employees, et cetera. All that information is sensitive, and there's regulation around what happens when it gets breached. And then if you have like system failures are huge and business interruption is huge. So you can imagine if you're a restaurant and your point of sale system goes down and you can't, I've been in a restaurant when this has happened. Who's been an insured, which is very ironic, is in Austin, Texas. This is an insured and they went down for like 4 hours. And so you can calculate how much loss there was in that downtime. So anyways, it's something that is becoming more well-known, but frankly, small to mid-sized businesses are larger targets than the bigger companies, just because they generally have less cybersecurity in place to be able to protect against those hacking attacks. And nobody wants to promote that they've been hacked. So a lot more businesses are generally hacked and paying ransoms for ransomware that are actually reported.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting. I know that we're almost out of time here. I know you are new to EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. But what brought you to EO? How did you hear about it? And, why did you decide to join?
I've heard about it multiple times from a few different people. We had an executive coach for a while that highly recommended it to us. I had one of the things that really sold me was we had a partner of ours that helps us with claims that I really look up to as a role model that was recommending it more than anything else. So just the amount of recommendations that came through, and then my experience in the test drive was like, there's so many challenges that business owners face, and most times they're facing them alone. And so it's just so cool to know that there's an organization that exists where you can share feedback, you can share perspective, you can lean on each other to go through some of those experiences, because, a lot of times there's just conversations you can't have with employees, with other owners, with, whoever else it is. And the experiences are pretty unique, right? There's not a lot of, it's not likely I'm walking down the street and I meet another entrepreneur, so it's very cool that it exists, and it's very cool that it's international. And like we were talking about before we started recording, I'm still getting my feet wet, and I haven't been placed in a forum yet. And so I'm excited to see how I can get the most out of it.
Yeah. Well, this has been great, Pat. Evolvedbrokerpodcast.com, I know, is one of your websites. Where can people go to check out the podcast and to learn more about your company?
EvolveMGA.com is our website for our cyber insurance firm. We created a podcast called the Evolved Broker Podcast, just purely to add value for the insurance brokers that we work with. So anybody that's on that podcast is going to be someone that is going to be really interesting to you if you're in the insurance world, whether it's a leader of a massive organization like Hub International, Mark Cohen, the CEO, or Inga Beale, who's the first female CEO of Lloyd's of London in 330 years, down to, how can we optimize sales? Like, the author of the Challenger Sale, hostage negotiators, to really hone our negotiation tactics. So we're just looking to provide value to insurance brokers there. So 2 different websites, and that second one is evolvedbrokerpodcast.com.
Excellent, Pat. Thanks so much.
Cool. Thanks, John.
Thanks for listening to the Rising Entrepreneurs Podcast. This episode is powered by Rise 25. Please subscribe and check out future episodes.